Ever feel like you're screaming into the void? Especially when it comes to your own family. I am Audrey Thompson, 32 years old, standing alone on the industry stage, clutching my award. They promised to be here front row cheering. Instead, they took a last-minute trip to the Bahamas without me. When I exit the stage, an elderly man presses something cold into my palm. A key. His eyes crinkle with warmth as he whispers, "Welcome home." Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and stick around to discover how this mysterious key unlocked everything I never knew I needed. My mother, Elizabeth, managed a high-end real estate business catering to Boston's elites. Success and achievement were not just encouraged in our household, but from as early as I can remember, there was an unspoken hierarchy in our family. I would earn straight A's and get a simple nod. Heather learned to navigate the family dynamics by becoming a mirror of our parents' ideals, never challenging their worldview. I believed naively that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, my parents would finally see me, really see me. I threw myself into graphic design with a passion that consumed me, hoping each new accomplishment would be the one to make them proud. High school graduation. My parents sat in the audience checking their watches repeatedly, leaving immediately after my speech to attend one of David's fundraising events. College graduation from Rhode Island School of Design. My mother commented that my chosen outfit looked unprofessional, and my father spent most of the ceremony answering emails on his phone. Over and over, the pattern repeated itself. Family vacations were scheduled during my important events. Birthday celebrations were forgotten or minimized. 5 years out of college, I had built a respectable career at Horizon Creative, a boutique design agency in Boston. Then came the breakthrough. A national hotel chain needed a complete rebranding for their luxury line. They wanted something bold but elegant, modern yet timeless. When the campaign launched, industry publications took notice. The client reported a 20% increase in bookings within the first quarter. That project earned me a nomination for the Apex Award, one of the most prestigious recognitions in the design industry. This was my moment, the validation I had worked toward for years. When the nomination letter arrived, I called my parents immediately. I could hear her typing in the background. "What day is the ceremony again?" "September 15th, I replied. "Friday evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel. I get 2 extra tickets besides my own. I was hoping you and Dad could come." The typing stopped. "Yes, I think that should work. Your father has a conference that week but returns Thursday night. We'll make it happen." For the first time in my adult life, I felt like they might finally witness something important to me. I allowed myself to hope, even sent formal invitations with all the details, though I had already told them verbally. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I splurged on a midnight blue gown that complemented my auburn hair and pale skin. 2 days before the ceremony, I called to confirm final arrangements. "I meant to call you. Something has come up." My stomach dropped. "What is it this time?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "What about the ceremony?" "Mom, this ceremony is the biggest moment in my career so far. I told you about it months ago. There will be other ceremonies, honey. Family comes first. You know that. David really needs this break." The conversation ended with vague promises to make it up to me, and assurances that they would be thinking of me on my big night. I spent that evening alternating between tears and anger, finally resolving that I would attend the ceremony alone. I would not let their absence diminish this achievement. I took a rideshare to the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching couples and families arrive together as I approached the ornate entrance alone. Women in elegant gowns accompanied by proud spouses, men in tuxedos with parents beaming beside them. Even my colleagues from Horizon Creative had brought significant others or friends to celebrate. Her husband stood beside her, a hand resting supportively on her back. "Thanks," I smiled, trying to project confidence. "You both look great too." A family vacation couldn't be rescheduled. On your award night? That timing sure is unfortunate. Making my way to our table, I noticed the empty chairs that should have held my parents. Throughout the dinner portion of the evening, I maintained pleasant conversation with my colleagues while fighting the gnawing emptiness inside. When dessert arrived, my appetite had vanished completely. I pushed the chocolate torte around my plate while announcements began for the award presentations. Best typography, excellence in web design, breakthrough new talent. I applauded mechanically, checking my phone periodically. No messages from my family, no acknowledgement of what they were missing. My category. My heart pounded as they showed brief videos of each nominee's work. The winner of this year's Apex Award is. The host paused dramatically, opening the envelope. Audrey Thompson for the Azora Hotel Collection rebrand. The room erupted in applause. My colleagues at the table jumped to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. I rose on shaky legs, smoothing my dress as I made my way to the stage. Thank you to the Apex Committee for this incredible honor. I began, my voice stronger than I expected. The speech I had practiced mentioned my family first, but I found myself pivoting. I want to express my deepest gratitude to my mentors at Horizon Creative, especially Sophia Winters, who gave me the freedom to take risks with this project. Tears pricked at my eyes. I smiled and networked on autopilot, the award clutched in my hand growing heavier by the minute. Though he must have been in his late 70s, he stood straight and tall with keen blue eyes that missed nothing. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. Harold Wilson was a legend in the design world. I'm such an admirer of your work, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched that someone of his stature had noticed my design. Harold gazed at me thoughtfully. You know, I watched you during your speech. Excellent content, beautifully delivered. But I couldn't help noticing you seemed to be looking for someone in the audience. They decided on a vacation instead. Harold nodded slowly. I see. They're lost then. Harold asked insightful questions about my creative process, listened intently to my responses, and shared a few remarkable stories from his own career. As the event staff began clearing the room, signaling the end of the evening, Harold reached into his pocket. Looking down, I saw an antique brass key with unusual teeth and a strange symbol engraved on its head, something like an interconnected spiral. Harold's eyes crinkled as he smiled. Tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. That key will open more than just a door. I stood clutching the key, turning it over in my hand, wondering what possible meaning his gesture could have. As I stepped outside to hail a ride home, my phone suddenly buzzed in my clutch, then buzzed again and again. Scrolling through, I saw they were all from my family, 20 from my mother, 15 from my father, the rest split between David and Heather. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of my bed, still in my formal gown, staring at the phone. The missed calls had been followed by a dozen voicemails and numerous text messages, each one more urgent than the last. The second message, left 30 minutes later, was more frantic. By the final voicemail, left just 20 minutes ago, my mother's tone had shifted to tearful manipulation. The irony was almost too perfect. I would call back, apologize profusely for not being available during my awards ceremony, book the first flight to the Bahamas in the morning, and sit by David's bedside while he recovered from what was, according to the text, no longer a life-threatening situation. I would swallow my resentment. The cycle would continue. Perhaps it was standing on that stage alone. Or perhaps it was simply the culmination of years of being overlooked, reaching a breaking point. I set down the phone without calling and instead texted my sister. Just seeing these messages now. Is David stable? Do they need me to come? I took a deep breath and called the hospital directly, asking to speak with David's physician. As I suspected, while the reaction had been serious, David was now stable and in no danger. I would book a flight for tomorrow afternoon, allowing myself this one night to process my achievement. I called Sophia, my mentor at the agency, needing perspective from someone who understood healthy boundaries. Part of me wants to drop everything and fly there immediately, I admitted. That's what I've always done. But another part feels like that would be continuing a pattern that isn't healthy for any of us. If the roles were reversed, Sophia asked gently, would your family have left an important event of theirs to come to you? The strange symbol caught the light, almost seeming to glow. Welcome home, he had said. Something about the mystery appealed to me, offering a distraction from the family drama unfolding across missed calls and text messages. My phone buzzed again, my mother. I would go to them as I always did, but on my terms this time. I texted my mother the flight information along with a brief message. David is stable, according to his doctor. I've booked a flight for tomorrow afternoon. Congratulations on my Apex award, by the way. The key on my nightstand caught the moonlight through the window. Its strange symbol was the last thing I saw before sleep claimed me. Morning brought more missed calls and increasingly hostile messages. Harold's invitation had been for 8 p.m. tonight, long after my flight would depart. I made another impulsive decision. As evening approached, I found myself standing before a weathered brick building in Boston's historic warehouse district. The structure dated back to the early 1900s, with large arched windows on the upper floors and a modest entrance at street level. Nothing about its exterior suggested anything extraordinary, yet the address matched the one on Harold's business card perfectly. I approached the heavy wooden door, noting there was no company name, just the street number and faded brass numerals. To my surprise, it slid in smoothly. The door swung inward silently. Heart pounding, I stepped into a dimly lit foyer. What had appeared from the outside to be an ordinary building revealed itself as an enormous open-concept studio, spanning what must have been several combined warehouses. One section housed printing presses, both antique and modern. There were photography studios, painting spaces, sculpture areas, and what appeared to be a small theater setup. Perhaps 30 individuals of varying ages moved through the space, engaged in conversations or focused on projects. "Audrey Thompson," came a familiar voice. "You found us." "My family situation." Perhaps that says something important about what you truly need right now. Harold gestured for me to follow him. As we walked through the space, people nodded in greeting, some looking at me with open curiosity. Talented, driven, but somehow alone in their creative journey, missing the true belonging that makes art not just successful, but meaningful. "How did you know?" I asked. Harold smiled. I recognized the look. I had seen it in the mirror decades ago, standing on stage, receiving accolades, scanning the audience for faces that weren't there. My parents never understood my choice to pursue design, rather than the family law practice. They refused to attend any industry event, believing I would eventually come to my senses. I know what it is to achieve in absence. "Audrey, meet some of our members." James Daniels, whose typography had revolutionized digital interfaces. "The color strategy was particularly impressive," added Kinji Yamamoto, a color theorist whose books sat on my shelf at home. I found myself engaged in the most stimulating creative conversation I had experienced in years. The workshop spaces included tools and equipment few individual creatives could afford on their own. "This space belongs to all of us," Harold explained. "Everyone contributes what they can, whether it's expertise, connections, or financial support. Some of our members are quite successful commercially. Others create work that is critically important but less financially rewarded. Here, those distinctions matter less than the quality of vision and generosity of spirit. If you choose to join us." "Mine," I echoed, stepping into the space, running my fingers along the desk's edge. "Every member has a personal studio within the larger collective," Harold explained. "I don't understand. Why me? Why now?" "Because you're ready," came a voice from the doorway. An older woman with silver hair and artist's hands stepped into the room. "I was watching you tonight at the ceremony. You stood alone on that stage and gave one of the most genuine acceptance speeches I have heard in years. No false modesty, no family platitudes, just authentic gratitude for the craft and those who supported your growth within it." "Eleanor was my mentor when I first joined," Harold explained. "Just as I hope to be yours if you'll allow it." Creative children whose families couldn't understand their vision or value their contributions. Successful professionals whose personal lives had been sacrificed to achievement without a witness. Talented individuals who had everything they thought they wanted professionally, but still felt fundamentally alone. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen. Not just my work, but me, the person behind the designs, the woman with hopes and wounds and vision. These strangers somehow felt more like family than the people who shared my blood. "Your brother's situation?" Harold asked. "And will you go?" asked Lucia gently. "Yes," I said after a moment. "But not because I'm capitulating to their demands. I'm choosing to go with clear eyes about the dynamics at play. That feels different somehow. The collective will be here when you return. That key is yours now, regardless of what tomorrow brings." More missed calls, more urgent texts, but for the first time they didn't fill me with anxiety or guilt. Instead, I felt a strange new clarity. Home wasn't the place where I had grown up, constantly striving for recognition that never came. Home was where I was valued for exactly who I was, without condition or comparison. I left the collective that night with the key tucked safely in my pocket, a talisman of belonging that would sustain me through whatever awaited in the Bahamas. No one offered to meet me at the airport. I took a taxi directly to Nassau General Hospital, my small suitcase in tow, the key from Harold secure in my pocket where I found myself touching it periodically for reassurance. David's hospital room was easy to find, the sounds of my family's voices audible from the hallway. I paused outside the door, took a deep breath, and entered. David, propped up in bed, looking pale but far from critical, tapping on his phone. My mother perched beside him, adjusting his pillows unnecessarily. Heather arranging flowers on the windowsill. Their reactions to my appearance were equally predictable. Finally, my mother said, her tone sharp with disapproval. "Hi, Mom," I replied evenly. 66, actually, I corrected. My father ended his call and turned to me with a frown. "But he didn't," I pointed out. "How would you know what his doctor said?" my mother demanded. The doctor confirmed what I suspected, that while the reaction was serious, David was stable and recovering well. Something snapped inside me. Years of accommodating their dismissive attitudes, of minimizing my own needs and achievements, of accepting the unspoken family hierarchy all collapsed under the weight of this newest injustice. "David needed," my mother began, but I cut her off. The room fell silent. My family stared at me as though I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. In all our years together, I had never directly challenged their treatment of me like this. "Family comes first, Audrey. We taught you that. We have always supported your little hobby," my mother protested. "My little hobby?" I echoed incredulously. "I am a senior creative director at one of the top agencies in Boston. My designs have increased client revenues by millions of dollars. And as of Friday night, I am an Apex Award winner, which puts me among the top designers in the country. But please, tell me more about my little hobby." "Look, Audrey, no one is saying your work isn't important. Aren't they? When have any of you attended a single one of my professional events? When have you asked meaningful questions about my projects? When have you celebrated my achievements without immediately changing the subject to something Heather or David has done?" "This should have been a family moment," I said quietly. "I wanted to share it with you. I saved seats for you." Instead, I stood on that stage searching an audience for faces that chose to be elsewhere. It was an emergency. Just like every other time you've chosen to prioritize David's anxieties or Heather's conveniences over my significant life events. It is a pattern that has existed my entire life, and I have finally recognized it for what it is. I showed them more photos, these from the collective. While you were all making me feel guilty for not immediately dropping everything for a non-emergency, I found people who actually value what I contribute to the world. People who understand my work and appreciate my vision without condition. It's called the collective, a community of creative professionals who support each other, both artistically and personally. They invited me to join them after seeing my work and recognizing something in me that my own family never has. My father scoffed. "Sounds like some kind of cult to me." "Of course that would be your interpretation," I replied. My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I will not sit here and listen to these accusations. We have given you everything, Audrey. We paid for that fancy art school. We supported you when you chose a career with no real security. And this is how you repay us? By attacking us during a family crisis." "I am not attacking you. I am finally speaking the truth about how I have been treated in this family. And I am setting a boundary that my accomplishments matter too. That I matter too." "Am I? When was the last time this family rearranged plans to accommodate something important to me? When Mom missed my college graduation for your soccer tournament? When Dad scheduled the family reunion during my first gallery showing? When you all decided that your vacation was more important than the biggest night of my career?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the Apex Award I had carefully packed in my carry-on. The crystal caught the hospital's fluorescent lighting, sending prisms across the white walls. "This is what you missed," I said, setting it on the bedside table. Well, congratulations on your award. But right now we need to focus on getting David back to the resort. The doctor is preparing his discharge papers. So predictable I could have scripted it. I'll be flying back to Boston tomorrow morning. I have a new project starting and apparently, a studio space to set up at the collective. We have the resort booked for 3 more days. We were going to take family photos on the beach tomorrow. I turned back with a sad smile. I'm sure the photos will be lovely. Send me a copy, why don't you? You can put it right next to the empty frame where my awards ceremony photos should have been. With that, I walked out of the hospital room, the weight of the key in my pocket somehow balancing the heaviness in my heart. When the door swung open, it felt like stepping into possibility. Harold was waiting in the foyer as though he had anticipated my arrival. Welcome back, he said simply. How was Nassau? Clarifying, I replied. And brief. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. The basic furniture remained, but now the space contained art supplies, reference books relevant to my specialty, and a high-end computer setup with design software already installed. We all contributed, Harold explained. Tessa mentioned you admired her lighting setup, so she had an extra installed here. James thought you might appreciate his collection of typography references. The computer came from Kenji, who recently upgraded his own system. The studio is yours whether you work here daily or once a month. The collective understands that creative rhythms vary. Each person I encountered showed genuine interest in my work and perspective. Unlike networking events where conversations were thinly veiled transactions, these interactions felt authentic and generative. Heather called once, ostensibly to check on me, but really to report that our parents were very hurt by my behavior. When I declined to apologize, she sighed dramatically and said, "You have always been so difficult, Audrey. Would it kill you to just go along with things for once? At least it would kill something essential in me. I'm not willing to sacrifice that anymore." David sent a text thanking me for coming to Nassau, carefully avoiding any mention of the confrontation or my award. I responded with civility but maintained the new distance I had established. Junior designers asked for mentorship, but the most profound changes were happening within the collective. Harold took me under his wing, sharing insights from his decades in the industry. "You've been designing for external validation for too long," he observed one afternoon as we reviewed my recent work. That question catalyzed a new approach to my work. I began experimenting with styles and methods I had previously avoided, concerned they wouldn't be commercially viable or would be dismissed by my family as impractical. Now, supported by a community that valued creative exploration, I found my authentic voice emerging stronger and more distinctive. "This wouldn't have happened without the collective," I told Harold as we celebrated the commission. "Not just the connections, but the confidence to put forward such an unconventional concept. My therapist, Dr. Patterson, helped me recognize patterns in my family dynamic that stretched back generations. My father mentioned once that his sister moved across the country and rarely visits," I told Dr. Patterson during one session. He always described her as the difficult one who abandoned the family. I'm beginning to wonder if her story might echo mine. This insight led me to reach out to my Aunt Valerie, my father's sister, who had settled in California decades ago, and whom I had met only a handful of times at major family events. Our phone conversation proved revelatory. "Your grandfather was the same way with your father and me," she explained. "It's a pattern that goes back at least 3 generations in our family," Aunt Valerie continued. The recognition that the pattern preceded me, that it wasn't about my personal failings or worth, allowed me to view the situation with greater compassion, both for myself and, eventually, for my family. I agreed to meet at a neutral restaurant, setting clear expectations beforehand about respectful communication. The evening was tense but civil. They made some effort to ask about my work, though their questions revealed how little they understood my field. "It's not just an art group, Dad. It is a professional community that supports both my creative development and my personal growth." I considered her question seriously before answering. "They offer a different kind of support, one that I have needed but never found within our family dynamic. That doesn't diminish our connection, but it does mean I'm no longer looking to you for validation in areas where our values and understanding differ so fundamentally? They didn't like this answer, but they didn't argue further. Heather remained the most resistant to change, continuing to act as an extension of our parents' perspectives rather than forming her own. As months passed, my life transformed in ways both professional and personal. My work at Horizon Creative evolved dramatically, incorporating the experimental approaches I had developed at the collective. When a leading design publication featured my post-Apex projects, they noted the remarkable evolution and newfound authenticity in my aesthetic. "Will your family attend this one?" Harold asked gently as we discussed the nomination. "I haven't invited them," I replied. "Instead, I've reserved seats for you, Eleanor, Lucia, and James's chosen family, the people who truly see and celebrate my vision." The night of the ceremony arrived, and this time I entered the Grand Meridian Hotel with a sense of peaceful certainty rather than anxious hope. Lucia and James engaged in animated conversation. When my name was called as the winner, their standing ovation carried the weight of true understanding. And when I returned to my seat, award in hand, I realized the empty space inside me had finally been filled, not with the approval I had spent decades seeking from my family, but with the self-acceptance that had bloomed in its absence. My relationship with my family had found a new, healthier rhythm. We connected, but on my terms, with boundaries that protected my peace. Slowly, surprisingly, they started to change too. David even showed up at a gallery opening, and for the first time he really listened as I talked about my work. He told me he'd spoken to Aunt Valerie, and was starting to see the generational patterns he never wanted to repeat with his own kids. "We're not perfect, but we're healing." With a smile I walked over, pressed a spare key into her hand, and gave her the address to the collective. The circle continues. Has anyone ever opened a door for you like that? Have you ever found your family in the most unexpected place?